And this is really the fundamental problem. They don't get it. They're absolutely mired in the 1990s mindset. That's how they won in 1992, and they cannot imagine a novel way, a new way of winning. It makes foreign policy, the war in Iraq, the centerpiece of a winning campaign. But it doesn't matter. If they don't get it, let them get out of the way. We have a historic opportunity to take back Congress in 2006, but it's not just going to happen without a national message. We saw that in San Diego. We saw that with the defeat of Francine Busby in San Diego, which is very significant because smart people in Washington kept urging her not to focus on Iraq, but on corruption in Congress. Iraq has so much more emotional resonance, especially in a place like San Diego, where there have been so many casualties and so much suffering from the war. And she listened, and she lost. And I don't want to hear from Rahm Emanuel that she only lost by 5%. I don't care by how much she lost. She lost. And it's time for us to stop losing. So we need to really stand up for what we believe, for what we know to be right. And we need to basically be the leaders instead of following those who we believe know best. We need to be the leaders and let those who understand follow us. It's time for us to look at the leader in the mirror. That's, after all, what the net roots are all about, and not compromise on this central issue, not because we're so purist, but because we're fed up with losing, and it's time to win. Thank you.
Now we'd like to take some questions. We have microphones here and here. I know we have a lot of very knowledgeable people in the audience. What we're going to do is a slightly different format than other panels. We're going to have 2 or 3 questions, and then we will direct them to the panel. So let's start over here. Is that microphone on?
I think my microphone is on.
Okay, we can start over here then.
So I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. I really appreciate your coming here. One thing I'd like to ask you about is the sort of ideological component that has come in with the war on terror, or whatever you want to call it. There's this notion that the war on terror is part of a campaign to spread democracy, and this has been something that's... Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
And this has been something that's been hard for me to argue against, the Wolfowitzes and people like that, because it seems to be almost ingrained in the American consciousness. Joseph Stromberg, one of the people on the anti-war right that Arianna Huffington talked about, calls the people in the Project for a New American Century Kantians with cruise and missiles, which almost arises a sort of Bolshevik thinking that these guys are more like the Soviets of old instead of the Americans of old. But it's been very hard for me to argue against this idea that we can simply spread democracy by force of arms. And I'm wondering if the panel has any ideas besides addressing the practicalities of the Great War on Terror that we can use to counter this notion that this is a good idea, or that this is somehow an American thing for us to do.
Thank you. Let's take this question and then we'll address them both.
Thank you very much, and this is a question specifically asked of Arianna. My name is Eric Massa, and I'm a candidate of the United States Congress from New York's 29th Congressional District. I didn't mean that to be a shout-out. There are now over 70 veterans who are Democrats running for the House of Representatives, and we collectively fear whatever it will be in October labeled as a national security surprise. We believe that one of the biggest tools that we as a party have to combat that is to make this a preemptive national issue. The Republicans believe in preemptive strikes, so do we. But we would like to level in on educating the American public and calling to attention that whatever it is they're going to pull, and it's very hard to predict, there will be some preemptive national security emergency, whether it's another Code Orange or the announcement the Iranians have detonated a secret underground nuclear weapon, something that will try to rally people back to George W. Bush. I think that by talking about that idea over to you for further publication nationally through the Netroots will help us diffuse that before they're successful pulling it off, and I'd like to hear your thoughts.
So can we hear both some ideas for ways to respond to the rhetoric from the right, and also perhaps an October surprise from the administration, but also how we go about getting that message out?
Well, first of all, I think the way to preemptively deal with a possible October surprise is to keep talking every day until we're really sick of hearing ourselves about how this administration has made the country less safe. That is really the key message. That is the key way to prepare the public. And in order to do that, we have to be unambiguous in saying that to win the war on terror, the first step is getting out of Iraq. And to win the war in Iraq, the first step is to stop making ourselves the issue. And while we are there as an occupying force, which is how we are perceived, we are the issue. I think there is nothing more important than that in dealing with an October surprise. In terms of the earlier question about bringing democracy to other countries, well, first of all, let's remind ourselves that this was reason number 5 about why we went into Iraq. Remember, bringing democracy to Iraq was not the way this war was solved. The war was solved because of the WMD presence, which was completely disproved, but nevertheless, democracy was the default position when there were no WMD, and we had to find an explanation as to why we were there. But beyond that, it is absurd to think that you can bring democracy to another country with your military power. I mean, this has never happened before, and it's not happening now. And that's, again, a message which is not complicated to communicate to the American people if we do it every day and if we do it in a unified fashion.
I would add on the democracy front that the simple answer, if you're talking to your neighbor, is I don't want American soldiers dying for politics in another country. And I don't want American soldiers dying to put health care in another country. And my progressive foreign policy vision is we use force to protect Americans and our national security interests. And that's it. And that's a realism position. It's different than a Wilsonian internationalism or something that some might consider more left. But that's where I come down, and I think that's very progressive, that we still have these other priorities. And as Arianna is pointing out, number one, tactically, it is more effective to use diplomacy to advance many of these goals. But we're not going to put U.S. troops on the ground in Africa to build a hospital. We will pay for it. We will join with other countries to work on it. And I think it's clear that Democrats have a strong background in that. And if you talk to your neighbors or you're out, behind enemy lines trying to make this point, people aren't worried that we don't have a human rights idea or a health care idea. They're worried about security is being pursued, and I think when you say you don't want to die for politics in another country, that's a way to bottom line it.
Just to follow up on the second question, I think that if there is a big foreign policy problem in October, which a lot of people refer to as a potential October surprise, all that means is that the administration has once again failed in some area of the world.